Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. This week we have some good economic news in both Europe and the United States. Tesla's We Robot event introduced robots that can serve you drinks and food now and talk to you at the same time. Warren Buffett continues his selling spree. He's now sold over $10 billion in Bank of America stock, and the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall, we had pretty good economic news for the week. The stocks in the United States were mostly positive. The Communist Republic of Canada was also positive. The S&P 500 in the United States made new highs. Most markets around the world were higher as well. Europe was mostly higher, Italy being the biggest winner there. Latin America also, they were mixed. The biggest market there, Latin America, Brazil, it's called the Bovespa, went down by over 1%. Africa and the Middle East, mixed as well. Egypt was the biggest loser there. Something actually that's pretty cool from Egypt. They're building a billions and billions dollar project to bring the water from the sea. They're going to desalinate it and basically create an artificial river to make a new depression to be able to think of it like an artificial lake, to be able to have more water, to be able to support more people. Pretty cool if you guys want to check it out. Africa and the Middle East, I mentioned, was mixed. The Far East, Australia, and Asia mostly missed as well. The Hang Seng out of Hong Kong was the biggest loser there, followed by Shanghai as well. Bitcoin, haven't gotten to the political news yet, but Trump is going to officially launch a token to sell to all his fans. Not a whole lot of other news when it comes to the crypto space outside of the fact that Bitcoin was pretty volatile for the week. It went to was slammed over 60,000, came back up for the week. It was down 1.82% at just over 63,000. Commodities and energy, the Naira, which is the currency of Nigeria, is now going to be the official currency of what they use to sell oil in Nigeria instead of the US dollar. This is an important piece of news because we've kind of been seeing this, what's the best way to say it in English? The turning away slowly of a lot more countries with the US dollar. Most people don't realize that the reason why the United States is the sole empire in the world is because there was an agreement with Saudi Arabia, it was the major producer of oil at that point, and they were just going to do everything in dollars. And then the world just kind of got accustomed to doing business in dollars, which gave a lot of power and influence to the United States. If a country like Brazil, for example, was going to do business with anybody like Russia, or if South Africa was going to do business with Colombia, or Canada with China, they all generally changed their currency into dollars and then paid in dollars, and everybody held a reserve of dollars. This has obviously changed a little bit over the years because of the euro and the yen and other, good economies that have come along, but it's a big problem because we're in a big problem now with the United States debt, as I've highlighted quite before. Elon Musk actually has been mentioning it recently as well, that we're just not going to be able to pay our debts anymore because at the point that we're going, the interest on the debt is going to be the biggest expense that we have in the United States. So because of this, and now more and more people are starting to notice, they're starting to not use the dollar as much, make direct bilateral negotiations with their own currency. In this case, Nigeria selling their oil in another currency other than the US dollar. Saudi Arabia, the agreement that I just mentioned, they also didn't renew that agreement. And so it's coming to a situation where kind of the painting is on the wall, if you know what I mean. And that's going to be a big problem for the dollar because then the value of the dollar is going to go down. And one of the primary reasons for that is there are more dollars outside of the United States than there is inside the United States. So now Nigeria, which had a big demand, they're the 14th largest producer of oil in the world, they had the demand for dollar, and everybody else, they're not going to have that demand for dollar anymore. And so that dollar, all those dollars, trillions of dollars are going to come back home, and that's going to cause inflation, hyperinflation, in fact. The Middle East conflict affected crude this week due to the fact that, remember last week I mentioned how Israel was going into Lebanon. That is continuing, so it spooked investors. U.S. crude WTI went up 1.72% to 75.56, while Brent, which is the international crude, went up 1.26% to 79.04. Gold for the year still on a tear. It's up over 30%. Obviously, it depends on when you watch the video. It could go a little bit higher or lower depending, but it's up 0.12 for the week, 0.12%, tongue twister. And it's got 2,657.70 cents, while silver actually went down over 2% to 31.61. This is part of the reason, for example, that we've seen such a tear in things like gold and silver, because when people are nervous about the future, let's say that, especially the US dollar, where else are you going to put your money that's quote unquote safe, right? Classically, it's been known and thought of that a lot of the precious metals, for example, are safe haven assets. So you put your money there, just let it sit there, and then you won't lose your money, because over time the value of that is going to go up because of inflation. Financial and banking news: the benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury, which is the debt of the United States with a 10-year time frame, rose more than 4 basis points to go up above 4% for the first time in August. And the U.S. CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, higher than expected. It went up by 0.2% rather than 0.1%. So the CPI in September, or the index of the price for the consumers, is actually 2.4% instead of the expected 2.3%. So let's keep an eye on that, because if it continues to go up, that's going to be a big problem. There was also a news article talking about how the food prices are starting to go up again, which is not a good thing at all. Remember that almost 70% of the United States economy is consumer spending. So the CPI, which is the price for the consumer, people that go out and buy stuff, unexpectedly went up. So if it continues to, quote unquote, unexpectedly go up, it's not a good thing for the economy, nor for you and I. Well, I live in Colombia, right? I have 12 dogs and 2 maids, and my expenses a month are $1,000, $1,500, something like that. Recommend you guys go overseas, because that's one of the ways. If you have an online job, you can own your own business. Definitely recommend it. Economic news: the Eurozone retail sales edged up in August, up 0.2%. So the consumer in Europe is also doing very well. Remember that in even those economies, the consumer spending is by far the biggest chunk of the economy. In Germany, for example, which is the 3rd largest economy in the world, largest in the Eurozone, they're almost half consumer spending. Japan, the same. If I remember the number from China, I believe it's 30%, 40% in China. Don't quote me on that, or leave it in the comments if you guys want to look it up on Google. The German government is now expecting the first 2-year recession in almost 2 decades. They downgraded the forecast of growth for 2024. As I mentioned in the political news, Trump is going to launch a crypto token. Wouldn't be surprised if there was some crazy stuff that happened before the election, which I believe we're about 3 weeks away. Warren Buffett in corporate news, continuing to sell his Bank of America stake. It's at over $10 billion in sales. He's nearing the key 10% non-reporting level. Boeing is going to cut 10% of its workforce, which is about 17,000 people, as their losses mount due to a machinist strike. Not that they haven't had other issues like planes falling out of the sky. Tesla went down 9% after its robot event, We Robot, underwhelmed investors, although they have been talking a lot of smack about Elon Musk recently in the news ever since he bought Twitter and gave free speech back to the world. So, I don't know if you saw it. It was actually pretty impressive. They had robots, literally Optimus, like a humanoid robot. It was serving drinks and talking to people and serving food. He also introduced a new robo-van and also a new completely automated vehicle, which is going to start producing next year. So it looks like they're starting to shift away, well, not away, but starting to focus on other things, which is, a lot of people are calling the 4th industrial revolution or the 4th economic revolution. BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, reached a record amount of assets that they're managing, $11.5 billion. They talked about their Q3 results. They made $5 billion in revenue. Their stock is up almost 20% in the last 3 months. JP Morgan Chase, which is the largest bank in the United States, that went up over 4% as well after they beat their profit and revenue forecasts. And Canadian TD Bank has been fined by the U.S. government $3 billion for pleading guilty to laundering money for Colombian drug cartels. They're going to make an agreement, do less business in the United States, some other settlement charges as well included in that. Generac, the company that makes the generators that run on gas and gasoline, they're up over 8% after Hurricane Milton intensified to a Cat 5 storm. They're anticipating a lot of sales. Investors are confident that they're going to be doing very well with all the natural disasters that we have. And at international events, record number of fires in Peru, 2 times higher than the amount of the record before. And Hurricane Milton obviously went to Florida. Luckily, it calmed down quite a bit. A lot of conspiracy theories online about how it was man-made because it got so strong so fast. Didn't have a lot of conspiracy this week, though. And luckily, it hit with being a lot less strong that we were expected. It was a Cat 3 instead of a Cat 5. And Tampa also was spared, as usual, knock on wood, because we had last few years, we've had 2 or 3, I think it's 3 that literally were going to go right directly to the Tampa Bay, and they just kind of swerved at the last second. This one kind of did the same thing and went south. There was a lot of damage with tornadoes, however, over 3 million people without power, but DeSantis is on the job, so we'll be all right. And interesting facts, Elon Musk on Twitter said that Joe Rogan will interview Donald Trump, which is going to be super interesting as well. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.